I think this idea of exercising your will, it can exist at different stages. For example, let's say I ask Sophia to play the piano, to practice because she has school tomorrow and she has to perform. Sloth happens to be one of the seven deadly sins. She's lazy and maybe she's tired. Maybe she's not moved by the piano, today. And I say this to her, ask her to play piano nicely, gently. Sophia, can you please go sit behind the piano and play a little? She doesn't listen. Then I raise my voice. And then she says, okay, Dad, maybe in like 5 minutes. I say, okay. This time, 5 minutes pass by and I realize she's so, not doing what I asked her to do. So I raise my voice and there is a hint of harshness to it. It's no longer a request, it's a commandment. And it's a commandment that comes with a good amount of threat. We're not going to have lunch at this or that place. You're not going to see your friends. Her will comes about because of fear, because of reprimands, because if she doesn't do A, she won't get C, D, or F. It also depends really what it is that you're trying to accomplish. If you're talking about tangible things, let's say you want to clean your room, for example, and you're just lazy. You can be lazy. There comes a point where your room is just going to stink, and the smell is going to inspire a certain set of emotions, specifically disgust, and then you'll rise up and you clean your room. If you're talking about things that are non-tangible, that you have these images of beauty, perfection, maybe you want to be like the Buddha, or maybe you want to be like Socrates. These are not things you can will yourself to be or become. It's really, really impossible. People are inspired by Malcolm X and Martin Luther, Mahatma Gandhi, Socrates, Jesus. These people inspire us. You even sit and read their autobiographies, all the stories that have been written about them, because you want to emulate them, you want to be like them. That's never, ever, ever going to happen. The quickest way is, forget what Gurdjieff says about will, self-remembering and the conflict and crystallization, all that stuff. Get rid of all of those things because they're really, really difficult paths. The most simple, the most easy. By easy, I don't mean it's struggle-free or pain-free or complex-free. Is what Irina had with Bai Sahib. What you have is a woman who wills herself to India, maybe because she's sad, maybe because she's confused, maybe because she's heard from someone that there's a guy in India who's really, really wise. So psychologically, she is coerced or manipulated in a positive way. It doesn't have to be negative. She gets on a plane and goes to India and finds this man. You can say maybe it's the marriage between will and inspiration. Once she sees this man, it's as if she has lost all of her control. In the first few pages, she says, I see this man and something about me stands up, wants to salute him, maybe kiss his feet, maybe kiss his hands. It's kind of like if you've read the first few pages of The Awakened Dreams. It's a really, really beautiful story where this young man, they're traveling with their friends to various parts of Turkey, and he happens to be a reflective fellow. And while everybody's on the train and laughing and, telling each other jokes, all of a sudden this young man is inspired to kind of move into the world of reflection and begins to ask some difficult questions from his friends. And his friends say, oh, Ahmed has gone into one of those modes, let's get him drunk so he could stop talking in that way. And they do, and Ahmed once again gets distracted. One day after work, he decides to walk home instead of taking the cab, and he passes by the cemetery and he says, cemeteries are interesting places. So he decides to take a walk through the cemetery, and he comes upon a hut. And this old man, who goes by the name Miradad, all of a sudden, appears. And the first thing that this man wants to do is, at first he says, I want to laugh, but what I really want to do is kiss his hands. And he says that to him. I know I don't know you, I've never seen you, but something in me says, let me kiss your hands. Can I do that? But this is Middle East. There's a good amount of humility and self-deprecation. So the old man says, you want to kiss my hand? Why? Let's just sit, have a cup of coffee and talk a little bit. So, and that's what Irina experiences. And as something happens to her psychologically, after a few maybe minutes of sitting with this man, she goes home and all of a sudden she's very frightened because she says, I've forgotten how he looks. Did he have a long beard or a short beard? Was he wearing white or black or orange? That doesn't happen to many of us, perhaps in a few lifetimes. What makes Irina's experience so, I think, interesting, and she's also profoundly lucky, is that Bhai Sahib has a lot of depth to him. It's not like a Brad Pitt where there is this illusion that he's an actor, that he has power, that he has looks. All those are wonderful things, but it's not going to take very long before you realize, despite how he portrays himself on the screen, when he goes home, he gets drunk, he is sad, he's depressed, he's lousy in relationships. When it comes time to interviews, there is no depth to the way he talks about things. And so after a few, minutes of listening to the interview, you kind of just turn off the TV and you walk away. So what remember, because if there is no depth to someone, you have to will yourself to go there again, to talk to this man, to look at him. And so because of the enormous depth that lives inside Bhai Sahib, and that's temperamental, that's cultural, that's how he was trained by his father, grandfather, the sort of experiences he had, the sort of reflections he had, the types of emotions that he has. And the very fact that you have tens of hundreds of people just coming to his house and visiting him. There is also the psychological factor of Irina Turi herself, that she believes that this man is her Messiah. So this relationship that she has been welded. She adores him. She loves him. So when he enters and he doesn't look at her, she's just heartbroken and miserable and depressed. When he reprimands her, where the volume of his voice goes up and it's harsh and it's negative, something about her just kind of falls apart. She doesn't need to exercise any will on her part. I think if we can love the right way, but most importantly, if we can love the right people, first, your love must have enough depth, and it can't be physical. If your love is physical, in other words, if you see someone and you begin to like the way he talks or he thinks, and then eventually there is this physical intimacy, whatever is physical, there's always going to be an expiration date, always. The lucky thing that exists for Irina is that this sort of emotion, this love that she has for this man, it has physical components, but it's resting on something that is not physical. I don't like to use the word spiritual, but I don't know any other words that could be used. So because the foundation is more psychological, more religious, more spiritual, then all the other physical aspects are being held in this container of spirituality. So the expiration date for that is long, long ways away. It can either come to you when you yourself have matured enough to realize that you don't really need to be around this person anymore. You can kind of figure things out on your own. You can live with sadness and depression and loneliness and grief. You can have creative moments, inspired moments. The muses speak to you now. Or the person dies. Or something happens where you just lose interest. And I think in many ways Gurdjieff was wrong in talking about will, and I'll tell you why. Because when Gurdjieff passed, when he died, there wasn't a single human being who could carry the lineage. Gurdjieff's ideas died with the death of Gurdjieff himself. What you have after Gurdjieff is fragmentation of the fourth way. It's kind of like when Jesus dies, You have all these branches of Christianity and all fighting. When Muhammad dies, you have all these branches of Islam and they're all fighting with one another. And you could kind of ask, why can't these people who walk with Jesus, who walk with Muhammad, who walk with Gurdjieff, why can't they will themselves to come to a peaceful place? Well, because will doesn't mean anything. You're dealing with a certain set of profoundly complicated emotions that live inside people. If you are in the presence of Gurdjieff, and Gurdjieff is talking about will and exercising will, he can do that because when you see Gurdjieff, a certain set of feelings and emotions all of a sudden appear inside you. And those emotions push you into physical engagements. If Gurdjieff wasn't there, you can fake emotions, but they're not going to last very long. These are just mirages. As you get closer and closer, they just disappear.